Today, the normally quiet Hanford Nuclear Reservation became the backdrop for an all-hands-on-deck emergency.
It's either a drill or an emergency. Gotta take cover.
8:13 this morning, the first call went out.
Engine 1912, rescue 1912, medic 1922, medic 1921, respond. PUREX tunnel for a possible collapse of the tunnel.
The information was coming in pieces.
It's just releasing contamination and high radiation out of the tunnel. So we're going to try to figure out the doses right now.
But as the morning went on, the news got better.
And what happened was dirt collapsed into the tunnel. Nobody's involved. There's no people involved.
By noon,
we're in a pretty good spot.
Good evening. I'm Claire Graham. Dan and Stephanie have the night off. While the tunnel collapse may not have had the wide-ranging effects many people feared at first, the emergency isn't over. However, we just learned the 3,000 workers who had been stranded have been released, which is a good step forward. We showed you during our Facebook Live update the first look at what we're talking about. It's this 400-square-foot hole which collapsed into a tunnel that contains rail cars full of nuclear waste. Tonight we do have team coverage. Joe McHale is looking into these buried rail cars at Hanford and found out this is a problem that dates back decades. But we'll start with KHQ's Katie Chen, who is live in the Tri-Cities. Katie, you've been in touch with people whose families were stuck at the site. What are they telling you?
Well, Claire, they're definitely very relieved tonight. And like you mentioned, all of those families have their loved ones home now. Normally, this road would be absolutely busy with people leaving work from the Hanford site. But like you said, they left early and crews are still monitoring the situation here at Hanford. Nearly 4,800 workers at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation were told to take cover after the cave-in. For hours, they had no real idea what was going on, just that there had been a tunnel collapse, and the Department of Energy crews were surveying for possible contamination, even using a robot. It all started when 6 Hanford employees on routine rounds noticed that an area of soil over one of the tunnels was sunk in. They initially thought it was just a 16-square-foot area, but that was ultimately upgraded, and ultimately we learned that it was a 400-square-foot area that collapsed. During a news conference, a Hanford spokesman finally confirmed that no one was in any danger.
It's important to underscore all employees are safe. There's been no evidence of a radiological release. The precautions being taken right now are purely precautionary.
He said the collapse happened in the 200 East area, which is in the center of the 580-square-mile reservation. It's home to the plutonium-uranium extraction plant, also known as PUREX, a massive facility more than 3 football fields in length. The tunnels contain several rail cars that were buried because they used to transport the plutonium and remain contaminated. Governor Jay Inslee said after the collapse, the White House reached out specifically to his office, adding in a statement that, quote, federal, state, and local officials are coordinating closely on the response, and the State Department of Ecology is in close communication with the U.S. Department of Energy Richland office, end quote. And tonight at 6, I'll bring you the story of a family member of an employee who described to me the tense moments before he knew everything was okay. Live in Richland, Katie Chen, KHQ Local News.
All right, Katie, thank you. Now, for decades, Hanford made plutonium for the nation's nuclear weapons arsenal, and the site still has a lot of nuclear waste that is still radioactive and dangerous. And today, one of the biggest concerns for people in our area was whether the winds were blowing. KHQ's Ryan Overton kept a close eye on that.
Yeah, that's right, Claire. I was here this morning as it was all playing out. And winds are always a concern as the contaminants can release into the atmosphere, and it was a big point for those in Hanford this morning.
Hey, 1912, watch the wind from that location. It looks like it is blowing easterly. Stay upwind.
As you can see, winds throughout the day have been fairly light. Not much is expected as far as the winds go later on this afternoon. Winds will be calm. You really need some strong gusts in order to carry this through parts of eastern Washington. And over the next 48 hours, winds between about 5 and 6 miles per hour. So no need for concern with those winds drifting any sort of potential contamination anywhere in eastern Washington. Claire, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Brian, thank you. These tunnels have been an environmental threat for some 20 years now. KHQ's Joe McHale has been looking into the chain of events that makes them so dangerous, even so long after Hanford shut down production. Joe?
Claire, so far what I've been able to determine is that these tunnels were never supposed to be a permanent solution to Hanford's radioactive railcar problem. The 12 rail cars stored in a tunnel and buried underneath Hanford soil were originally used to transport radioactive fuel. The cars delivered the fuel from the production reactors to the plutonium finish line using 158 miles of track. But after decades, the rail cars became saturated with radioactive waste and taken out of service along with the entire PUREX site. For nearly 20 years, Hanford officials have been trying to shrink the radioactive footprint, including coming up with a permanent plan for these rail cars. Back in 2010, the removal process started along the rail spur. Geiger counter-carrying cleanup crews and hazmat suits brought in load after load of sealant. Weeks of work necessary to safeguard event the short trip to the tunnels.
And we're pumping a real wet slurry of grout into the rail cars, and we're filling them up. What we're doing is we're taking care of any water issues. We're macro-encapsulating and reducing the dose, so when we go to ship these cars, they can be shipped easily and compliantly.
But plans to decontaminate, then dump the cars into the Hanford site's huge environmental restoration disposal facility were put on hold because, according to this press release, taking the trains out of the tunnel would entail extreme worker safety hazards and would be more costly than grouting in place. Claire, the fate and final resting place for these rail cars remains up in the air for now. It would be up to the Trump administration to issue extra funds to mop up the mess this tunnel collapse has exposed. In the newsroom tonight, Joe McHale, KHQ Local News.